our 1320 Kings insider, James Ham. I think there was a point in that third quarter where the first quarter. There was a point in the first where the game started slipping away from them a little bit, and you could see him like, oh man, like you could see him kind of react to it. I think the emotion of that game.
He was out of that game.
I think the emotion of that game.
He looked a little rattled in that game. James, we're talking about the Kings Pacers game. Tyrese coming back to the Golden One Center this past year, number 10 game on the top 25 games of the season. But just talking about how Tyrese was a little rattled for that game.
Tyrese is not a villain.
Absolutely,
he does not want.
Absolutely not.
You know what though? He's almost tried to make himself into a villain. You know, like I know he's so incredibly likable, but the more he talked about the Kings, the worse it kind of got. And I know a lot of fans have got to a point with him where it's like, man, just move on. Stop talking about the Kings. Stop talking about that experience. You're not here anymore. It happened. It's over. It's done with. And I know people always ask him about it, but there are a certain time where you can just say, you know, I've kind of moved on and I just don't want to really discuss that anymore. I think your first time back is always such an emotional thing. And it's something that we get, you know, with players all the time. Like you look at the calendar at the beginning of the year and you start circling dates of players and that are going to come through Sacramento. And you're like, okay. And for me, you know, like when you're around these guys all the time, it really is like when you're going to school and then some kid just like moves away out of nowhere and you didn't know it was coming and then you don't get to see him anymore. And so there is this sort of thing when they do come back in the building that is catching up with someone that, you know, you had relationships with, whatever they may have been, good or bad. But I definitely, you know, with him very specifically, like, I think it was hard for him. It was emotional to leave here. It was not for Buddy Hield. And maybe that's why fans, you know, there's plenty of things that Buddy did, but maybe that's why, you know, fans are so harsh on him because they're like, look, man, we had your back for years. You know, we talked about is how you have the most 3-point makes through the first 3 years, the first 4 years, the first 5 years of an NBA career. You know, we even like did your leap year birthday and gave you an extra year. And you just like, you treat us bad on the way out the door when it wasn't the fans that really had anything to do with what happened there. Just like a lot of it was on him.
And this was even before the suggestion of what the Kings should do with his anatomy. This was before that video. That video came out later for no reason, just out of nowhere. But
they were in Milwaukee.
But he yells what he thinks the Sacramento Kings should do, and it was like, oh,
and they weren't even talking to him.
Weird.
They're talking to somebody else.
No denying
something else.
No denying that accent though. We knew.
Oh yeah. No facts.
I said I had a Harrison. I said I had a Harrison Barnes. I said I had a Harrison Barnes note from this game. He had 22. Kings were 9-1 at the time when HB scored 13 plus.
Wow.
Yeah. Like we went last week, while you were gone, Damian, last week, we went through some of the stats that are strange. And what were they, Kenny? 13-3 when Trey Lyles scores over scores over 13 points and something like 23 or 22-7 when he scores in double figures. Like some players have that impact on a squad, and Harrison Barnes has always been one of those guys.
Leading scorer in that game, by the way, despite the fact that the Kings scored 137 points, the leading scorer had 22. They had 7 double-digit scores, including Malik Monk. 14. Boy, this is KZ Okpala's day. KZ Okpala played 14 minutes in that one and made a 3.
Let's go.
I don't believe you.
That game
happened.
We got Delly minutes because it was a 30-point game.
It was, yeah.
I think we got
Delly minutes. Yeah, we got Alex Len minutes, Rashawn Holmes minutes. Yeah, in fact, everybody played.
Everybody plays, everyone wins.
That was the game where everyone got to take off their warm-ups and go play basketball.
That's right.
You're listening to D-Lo and KC on KIFM West Sacramento, 98.5 FM, KRXQ HD2 Sacramento, ESPN 1320. Always live on the free Odyssey app, live on 1320 TV, on Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and live with our 1320 Kings Insider, creator of the Kings Beat, and the man who filled 20 hours of radio last week, our man James Ham. James, I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions you probably already answered, but I got to get your opinion on this.
Okay.
I wasn't able to tap in as much as I like. What did the Neemias Queta signing mean to you?
Yeah, I wrote on that yesterday at the Kings Beat, and I really do think this sets up a very interesting battle at the center position. And I think it's between Nerlens Noel and Neemias Queta for who's going to get sort of, I don't want to say it's the last roster spot, because the Kings only have at this moment, they have 15 guys on the roster. They could actually keep all of them. But it doesn't really make a lot of sense to walk into a season with 4 true centers and Trey Lyles, and one of those centers being an all-pro who's going to play 35, 36 minutes a night. And so I think that this is going to set up a really, really interesting battle. I also think, like, as the numbers go, there's absolutely no difference between the guaranteed money that Nerlens Noel got, which was $300,000 to show up to camp, and $600,000 if he makes opening night roster. Queta got $250 for showing up at camp and $500 for making the opening day roster. If you look at like the veteran versus a second year player, that actually makes a lot of sense. And so this is like a, no holds bar, like whoever shows up ready to play, and the second the ball goes up, shows that they're the guy, will get the job. And I think that Neemias Queta has a little bit of an edge here, because when they signed him to a deal, it was not only for a non-guaranteed first year, but they actually got a second year of non-guaranteed, where Nerlens Noel is 29 years old. He got a 1-year deal. So the Kings could actually retain rights, not only for this season, but next season. And then because of that, if everything worked out really wonderfully, you'd actually have restricted free agent rights to Neemias Queta after that second year, which would be his 4th year. So yeah, I like Queta. I think this is going to be fun. I think he needs to show up on day one and play like he did in the 4th quarter of that one summer league game where he just dominated. There is no time to get comfortable. There is no time to wait around and ask questions. You got to go out and you got to play hard from opening tip and show that you belong.
Got to point something out real quick. One, we're going to turn your mic on. 2, D-Lo and KC live on 2 radio stations for the first time right now.
What up?
maybe not live, but D-Lo and KC on 2 radio stations right now. So I just thought I'd point. I looked at it. Oh, it's 3:05. Oh, the new job started.
Come on, man.
That's not strange.
We're going live. Like, obviously we use the magic of the system to get through the first hour, and I'm just nervous as hell. Like, I don't want this hour to end. I'm scared to death, James.
We're gonna kill it, baby.
It's like my first day at school. Like, I'm scared to death.
You're gonna get out of there. You're gonna run down the hallway. You're gonna be all sweaty and be like,
Yeah.
"Oh no."
Speaking of, I think Damien agrees with me, James, that you would, don't listen to the other people, you wouldn't enjoy a Travis Scott concert.
What you said he wouldn't?
He would.
Yeah, no, yeah. I think you would too. It is a show.
Yeah.
If he picked you to go on the roller coaster, you'd have some decisions to make, because he was putting fans on that roller. I was like, y'all, I know. There was fire involved. Like, there was a lot happening. Yeah, there was a lot happening. But he is a performer.
I like going to shows where there's a performance. Like that's cool. Like I told you guys last week, like going to Timberlake, that is a performance. I mean, that dude walks like 30 or 40,000 steps, like his entire thing. And, like the same with Maroon 5, like Adam Levine is all over the place. So I don't mind, like one of my first concerts was Pink Floyd at the Oakland Coliseum, which of course they put on like a laser light show and giant, like all kinds of things, like blow up, like rats and pigs and like
Drake
kind of crazy.
Yeah, Drake has some unique props for his upcoming show. If you're not busy this weekend and want to go see him in San Francisco,
Check him out.
There's interesting Interesting choices were made.
Well, there's that, and then things that people throw on the stage.
Well, that happens too. That happens too.
Adam Levine moves like Jagger, right? I just know him from the voice, but
yes,
yeah,
got the moves like Jagger.
Yeah, he's all over the stage, and even I think when we saw him at Golden One, like his wife had given birth like the night before, and so he was exhausted. You could tell, and I don't think it was his best show. It gave like the old college try, but you could tell it was like he was a little bit worked over.
Did you see Bruno? Aldrin J makes a good point. You probably enjoy a Bruno Mars show. Did you see Bruno when he was here?
No, I didn't.
He's good.
I did see Elton John, which Elton John like that. It's not the same at all, but Elton John has this like piano that drives around the stage, and then by the end of it, you start thinking, I wonder if Elton John like takes that to the grocery store. Like the driving piano, because it kind of looks like one of those little carts. And you could just see him like just going through the middle of the grocery store, playing piano, like stacking up all of his canned food next to him along on the bench. And
I'm going out on a limb that Elton John doesn't go to the grocery store.
No,
that's
probably not.
That's just a guess on
he
my
had
part.
DoorDash.
That's right.
Yeah.
Also, Adam Levine, didn't they perform at the Super Bowl?
I think so.
With Beyonce and Bruno Mars.
That's right. They added Beyonce late. They were like, wow, this was not received well. Beyonce's back, ladies and gentlemen.
Beyonce, everybody. Beyonce.
Yeah, it was like 4 years after she had just done one before.
Beyonce. Let's go, everybody.
Amazing.
But you were talking about Namias Queta, and we talked about it last week, but it's like, hey, man, this guy, the Kings have shown an investment in Namias Queta, in his career, and trying to make sure that they give him every possible opportunity to see this thing through and be who they think he can be. He's got to reward them from the start. Like, training camp has to be, I'm going to come in here, I'm going to dominate Alex Len, I'm going to dominate Nerlens Noel. I'm going to leave no doubt in my mind, or in their mind, that I should be on this team, that I should be the backup center. He has to come out that way. Has to. I hope he does, because contrary to what the streets are saying, I like Namias Queta.
That wasn't the streets, that was me.
Well,
I don't think you
everybody
like
else.
Queta. Yeah.
I always like when I look at this roster, especially all the big men. I get that Sesame Street, like 4 of these kids are doing the same thing, and one of these kids is doing his own thing song, and I feel like Nerlens Noel, like on paper, like seems like a really interesting idea, right? But I hate to say this, like I said it last week about Damian Jones, like Damian Jones is who Nerlens Noel thinks he is. But I also, like, the Kings had a version of this last year, and his name was Rashawn Holmes, and he was owed $25 million over 2 years, and he couldn't figure out a way to build his value at all on this roster. I just have a hard time looking at Nerlens Noel and thinking that he's going to have more success than what Rashawn Holmes had last year. And so I'm not sure how it will work out, but we're looking at a guy who has missed so many games in his career due to injury. And the last couple of years, he just hasn't been really good enough to be a rotational player on most of the teams he's been on. And so, again, on paper, I like the idea of him, the shot blocking, the steals, the defensive acumen. But I like a player like Namias Queta, who's 5 years younger, who's been in your system for 2 years, who understands how to set a screen, who is developing as a passer, who is tremendous as a defender, was an all G League defender. Like, I think he led the nation in shot blocks in his junior year at Utah State. He's been a guy who's averaged like 1.9 blocks per game at the G League level. He's got no experience, and that's going to be the problem. But I really do think the key to Namias Queta making this roster isn't the Nerlens Noel aspect. It's that you brought back Alex Len. And so if you can bring in Nimi, you can give him one more year to develop. You can use the G League to go back and forth, which you can't use with Nerlens. You can send him down. If he hasn't played in 2 weeks, you can send him down for a run and let him build his confidence, let him get in shape, and then bring him back up when you need him for minutes. And so there's a lot of advantages, and the fact that you have him for another year for dirt cheap, that's another big deal. So I think it gives Nimi some opportunity here. I just hope that the coaching staff and the front office feels the same way that I kind of look at it, because he's a good kid and he's good to have around the team. And I think he deserves a shot, even if it's to show the rest of your guys on your G League roster and in your system that there is a way to become an NBA player by going through the Stockton Kings and the Sacramento Kings and coming out the other side.
Hammer, you brought up Rashawn Holmes a minute ago, and comparing Rashawn and Nerlens Noel and Nerlens, how those two might, compare a little bit. Why do you think the Rashawn thing failed? So that's a strong word. It clearly didn't work out. Why was it? Fit, talent? What was it that just it became clear just Rashawn's not going to work here?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's play style. Like Rashawn Holmes is your standard pick and roll rim running big, and that's just not what the Kings do. So that's a problem for Holmes right away. He was kind of lost in the shuffle. And then if you compare him and Chimezie Metu has the ability to defend multiple positions, where Rich was more of a straight center that could defend centers, could defend bigs. He's okay on the perimeter, and I thought he was really good a couple of years ago. But for whatever reason, when Rich got his big contract, which a lot like Buddy Hield, he wasn't happy about the big contract he got. He was promised way more by his agent at the time. He was looking more like $18 to $20 million a year, and then had to settle for the 4-year, $47 million contract that he got as an early bird player. Like, I think that there was just something about like him not being super happy. He came into camp, things weren't going that well. He ends up getting scratched in the eye pretty bad. Then he ended up getting his eye lacerated like a couple of games later, where he actually needed a procedure and got stitches in his eyeball. He came back, and then he got COVID, and that was a problem. And then while all of this is going on that we can visibly see, behind the scenes, he was going through just this horrific family matter with his son and his former wife. And he had a lot going on. We get all the way to February, nothing's really going well for him at all, and the Kings go out and trade for his replacement. And so I think if there was anything else that could have gone wrong for him in that year, it would have gone wrong. And it did. That's the other thing that was missed. One of his cousins that he was really close to passed away, either in December or January of that season. So he just really got behind the 8 ball. And for whatever reason, he wasn't able to get the reset with the new coaching staff that so many of these other players were. And so while I feel for the guy and I hope it all works out for him, like a lot of these things, it's on you as a player to figure out how you fit in. You can't just wait around for the team to give you opportunity after opportunity. And when you get on the court, you have to perform. And that's something that he just really wasn't able to show, that he could consistently be part of the rotation. And I will still make the claim, he's the exact type of player that plays well with Malik Monk. Malik Monk loves a good lob guy. And
somebody had it.
Happened.
Somebody had it.
3:15 in 50
Somebody
seconds.
I saw it happening earlier. You guys were too late. I saw some numbers. 341. That's not good enough. 336. That's not good enough. 324.
315.
The closest right there.
He thawed out right in front of us.
I blame Russell Hunt.
Well,
that's who I blame.
That's
right there. Yeah,
no
that's
frozen
your fault.
ham today.
That's your fault, Russell. It's all on you, bro.
No frozen ham today. But you were saying how Rashawn is the perfect player for Malik.
Yeah, I was saying he's a perfect player for Malik, but for whatever reason, he just wasn't able to figure out a way to get a reset like so many other players. And I think that's, if you're looking at Nerlens Noel, that might be one thing that you could point to, that he is a lob threat like Rashawn Holmes. But I'd rather have a guy like Nimi who just has so much more to his game. And when he rolls to the basket, he clears like a gigantic lane. You have to defend Neemias Queta. and he takes multiple players out of a game by running to the basket because of his size. And so I think in the Kings space, space and movement offense, he could really become a player.
Yeah, I want to see him. I think it's the aggression. We talked
From
about
Kada?
it. Yeah, I think it's the aggression. And, I want to see him be aggressive, have a sense of urgency, out there. And we talked about in Summer League, it can be difficult because, the guards are out there trying to showcase. Nobody's like running an offense to get the ball to the bigs. But for me, that didn't have anything to do with the rebounding numbers, and they were solid. But I just want to see. I think he plays his best when he's aggressive out there and not when he's trying to let the game come to him. So when he gets to training camp, I want to see him be aggressive. I want to see him getting after it with Nerlens Noel and Alex Len.
Yeah, that's the key. He's got to go out and just say, look, I feel comfortable and I'm ready to perform. Mm-hmm. And that's what I feel like too many times I see him work himself into a game. And when you're a backup to an all-NBA player, there is no working yourself into a game. You are never going to have the opportunity to get a 7 to 8 minute run to get comfortable. That's just not what your role is. It's not who you are. When you step on the court, you need to know right away that you're engaged and ready to go. And I'll point again to the LA game last year where he ends up having one of his best games. I think he had 12 points and 8 rebounds, something like that. And in the first minute and a half he was in the game, he fumbled like 4 rebounds out of bounds. And he just wasn't ready. And like, that's where he needs to have someone in his ear telling him, you better be ready. You better go out there and not just run around crazy and act like you're ready and act like you're engaged, because that's going to do nothing but lead to the other thing that Mike Brown hates. If you're going to go in a game for Domantas Sabonis, you better not go out there and pick up 3 fouls in 2 minutes, because then that puts the team in the penalty. And you're putting your team after you leave the court in a bad position. And that's something that, Neemias is going to be asked to go out there and defend without fouling and play his game and get comfortable quickly. And if he can't figure it out, then like, again, that's on him, because he's not going to get a shot, at least not in the next year or two, to be a starting center in the NBA. The only way that happens is if he's played really well and Domantas Sabonis gets hurt or he gets sick and you need a replacement for a couple of games. That's it. Outside of that, you're going to have to work your way into the league through 3 to 5 minutes at a time and earning your stripes and showing that you can stay on the court and you can do what's asked of you without picking up a bunch of silly fouls.
Is that the only true training camp battle going on when camp gets underway?
No, I think like we could see, like we always talk about like the 8.5, 9 or 9.5 man rotation, that half man. Mm-hmm. I certainly think that half man is out there, especially like at the 3. Like, can Chris Duarte carve out a niche on this team? Can Kessler Edwards carve out a niche on this team? Can Colby Jones just shock everybody and say, hey, look, it's me? I mean, those are things that you gotta, that one position, I think is up for somewhat grabs. But again, we're talking about half man rotation, and especially with, Sasha Vezenkov, he should be the backup 4 and Trey Lyles should be the backup 5. And so, and Keegan Murray is a starting 4, but he should be the backup 3 as well. So these are things that you kind of already know. I don't think that there's a lot that needs to be decided. It's just, who steps up and fits in and makes sense.
Who do you, I mean, you kind of mentioned it right there. And I think that's kind of where it stops. We talk about Kada and Nerlens Noel and Alex Len and all this other stuff. I really think those guys are going to be situational bigs, right? Not your traditional backup big. Kada, Len, Nerlens Noel, they could each, all 3 of them go 5-6 games without playing, at some point. And more times than not, it's going to be Trey Lyles, Sasha, Duarte, Keaton, like those guys are going to be filling out the majority of the minutes. Do you kind of see it the same way, where these starters, almost a little bit like last year when people wanted a break for these guys, thought we might be wearing them down, but Sabonis, Keegan, Fox, These guys are playing 32, 33 minutes a night.
Yeah, that's going to be how it goes. I mean, you don't take all NBA players off the court. And, if Sabonis is healthy, he's going to play between 34 and 36 minutes a night. Same with Fox, and same with Keegan Murray. I'd say that's the other guy that you're going to point to because of his youth. Now, we have some other like minutes battles, right? So, like Kevin Huerter averaged around 30 minutes a game last year. Malik Monk averaged only 22. That's not what we saw in the playoffs. And I think the playoffs might be like a glimpse into a window of what we might see early in the season, where, again, Trey Lyles playing small ball or Alex Len getting an opportunity, even when it sometimes didn't make sense. And he went out there and made sense of it for you, where he was going up against smaller players, but ended up being a problem because you couldn't keep him off the glass and because he was deterring shots and setting nice screens and doing stuff. So, like, I think that this team is deep, but it's also a team that's like almost completely the same team it was the year before.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the only guy who's going to play that was going to play rotational minutes, it wasn't on this team last year, is Sasha Vezenkov. And then maybe Chris Duarte. But again, we're talking about like half of a rotation spot for Duarte. Now, if Duarte can come in and start stealing minutes, whether it's from Herder or it's Monk or it's like letting you somehow cut back Harrison Barnes from 30 to 32 minutes to 24 to 26 minutes, that could actually be a big deal because Harrison Barnes, at 31, he's a player that you need to make sure that you're monitoring, especially when he goes out there and plays 82 games and then 7 postseason games. And at some point looked like he ran out of gas a little bit.
You think there's any, is there a figuring out process with Sasha for like the Kings, the rotation? Obviously, there'll be a certain learning curve for Sasha. That's understandable, coming from EuroLeague to the NBA. But in terms of how Mike plays and how the team plays, do you think there's going to be any adjustments with him, given the fact that he's a guy who will probably almost certainly have major rotational minutes?
I don't think so. I mean, he's such a smart player. That's what we've seen in Europe. And also tell you, like when the Kings traded for Sasha Vezenkov, he was just becoming a prospect at like 25 years old. Like he wasn't this like, really, really good European. He was a solid European player who had, been a pro since he was 15. So we're talking 10 years of him being basically a role player in Europe. It wasn't until they traded for him that he really started getting an opportunity and then really took advantage of that opportunity. So the last 2 years, he's been really, really exceptional at the European level. And the reason I bring that up is because before that, that's not who he was. He was a role player like everybody else. And so I'm going to expect that he can play multiple, like he has the ability to have his identity shift at the pro level. He's not going to be the primary guy. He's going to be a guy who gets plenty of shots. He's going to be a guy that you're going to see on some back cuts and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that just happened. But overall, I think you're going to see him stand in the corner and just shoot threes a lot of the time. And that's okay, especially while he's learning the game. I think he'll have a little bit of the role. I know it sounds a little bit strange that Keegan Murray had last year. Like that's what he's going to be early in his career is like, we need you to emulate what Keegan did. And Keegan in year 2 is going to be able to add more and more to his game. Where I think, again, when you see Sabonis step off the floor, Keegan is going to be more of an offensive hub than he was last year. And so I think Vezenkov will actually fill in a lot of what Keegan brought to the team last year.
We'll talk more about Keegan Murray. Want to get James Ham's take on James Harden, the funniest story in professional sports. We've got that coming up as D'Lo and KC. Brought to you by Sky River Casino resumes here on Sacramento Sports Leader ESPN 1320. Do we? Okay, good. It's not that I'm worried. It's just the live part. It was like, oh, recording's easy.
Marley, you'll be fine.
A red light goes on, man. Kimberly.
I don't know how you do any of it either. That's wild. I don't know. And I've never been a DJ. So, like, because the job that you do here and the job you do there are two totally different jobs.
Very, very different things. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And that I think people always forget, like, even when you're on TV, right? There's so many different things that you can do. You have like a live hit where you're just staring into a camera.
Mm-hmm.
You have a hit where someone says, "Okay, I need you to talk for 45 seconds," and you're like, "Talk about what?" "Well, I don't care. Just talk for 45 seconds." And you're like, blah, 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 you know. Then there's the times where there's two of you on set. There's times where there's three of you on set, and there's times when you're at the arena, and that set's different than when you're in the studio, and there's like a giant floating camera everywhere. And then even when you're there, there's a one shot where you're staring into a camera talking and you're keeping people engaged. There's a two shot where there's two of you and you need to go back and forth. Then there's a three shot where you got to keep everybody involved, including the camera, who is the fourth person in the room. So like there's all of these different things that you don't think of when you're going through it. And you know, so you can do a lot of different things there.
And then you have producers. Yeah, producers that are different. That like want you. Okay, when Sarah asked the question, turn the focus on the camera. It was always like Marshall and Sarah always gave me a lot of because I was only in studio with them. I've never been.
Yeah,
but they would always say, "Don't worry about the camera. Just look at us." Because I think it's when you start looking at the camera that you get nervous. Like, am I looking in the right place? Like, what exactly am I talking to? Whereas if I just look, slightly over here and there's Marshall and there's Sarah, it's much easier.
Well, and there's also the video below the camera. So people who don't know, there's a camera, and then below that, there's you looking at the camera. And what you don't want to do is just lock in and keep talking to the camera, because then people get freaked out. So you have to like engage and be part of like a different world. And again, that's where it depends. Are you in a 3-person panel? Is there just two of you? Like a lot of it's weird.
Yeah. Yeah. And that camera sometimes it's basically running the show. So sometimes it's the highlights, or as James said, it's you. And you look at the camera at the wrong time and there's you.
There's you.
Yeah, it's just like
that. And as we got deeper and deeper into the pandemic, and there was less and less staff, like we got to a point where there's no one, like when you're on set at the arena, there's no one pointing at what camera. So typically there's a stage director who's like pointing at this camera, that camera, they're pointing so you can see them flashing out of the corner of your eye and look at different cameras. Well, guess who the first person who didn't get a job, who lost their job was?
Now you just look for the light.
Yeah, now you're looking, or they just don't do they don't say anything, and there's one guy running two cameras running back and forth, like, oh, this is nuts. Yeah, it's very different.
You got that text from Lindsay, right? Lindsay.
Oh,
CBS?
I did. Yeah.
I kind of said like we're in, so I'm gonna call her and get more of a feel for what she needs.
For sure.
Did you hear from Charlie today, by the way?
Me?
Yeah.
I got a couple of a 1-sentence text.
Okay. Yeah. I'm sure it's Yep.
With the I responded with the brother from what
is that?
Why am I drawing a blank? Goofy.
Oh, Napoleon
Dynamite.
Yeah. Stupid ass movie.
Stop.
Movie's terrible.
That's the one.
I will die on that hill. Hang on, James. Hang on.
All right.
Steelo and KC here with the creator of the Kings Beat and our 1320 Kings Insider, James Ham. Appreciate you so much for being with us. Appreciate James for being with us. James, did you laugh as hard as we did when the James Harden, Daryl Morey story broke, where the Philadelphia 76ers said, hey, we tried. It's over. We're done engaging with talks regarding James Harden. We'll see James Harden at camp. And then James is at some camp overseas and says, I will never play for a team that Daryl Morey runs. I repeat, I will never play for a team run by Daryl Morey. Oh, this This is good stuff, man.
It's good stuff. I just
I don't
Daryl
like
Morey's.
either one of these I don't like either one of those guys.
Yeah, I've met Daryl Morey a couple of times, and I've always had a good like interaction with him. But you have to remember that Daryl Morey, deep down in his soul, believes that every room he's ever walked into, he's the smartest guy in the room. And that's just who he is. And if that's part of what makes him really good. It's part of, James Harden believes that he's the best basketball player on any court he's ever played on, is what makes James Harden so good. But I think the track record will go down that, Daryl Morey is, he's been a solid GM who's at least had his team in really good, playoff position for years, but really hasn't been able to get over the hump and win anything. Daryl runs like the Sloan Analytics Conference at MIT. Like he's a brilliant, brilliant man, but so much of what he's done over the course of maybe the last 5 years is just so filled with hubris and like arrogance, and the way that, even to go back to the way that I feel like he handled Monty McNair when it came to the Ben Simmons stuff, where they just used the Kings as the boogeyman the whole time, that he's going to the Kings, and then just wouldn't ever have a reasonable deal. Like that's a lot of what he does. He pushes the envelope to where it's really not even fun to deal with him. And I think that there will be a lot of teams that or even there has been a lot of teams that have taken a step back and don't work with those guys, that don't want to deal with him and his people, because it just doesn't feel like you're ever going to get a fair shake. And I know some people can disagree with this, but like the best trades are the ones that work out for both teams. The best, Domantas Sabonis for Tyrese Halliburton, it's working out for both teams. Sabonis is staying in Sacramento. He'll be there a minimum of 7 years. That takes away that little thing that, he could leave at any moment type deal. And Tyrese Halliburton is going to continue to become a better and better player. And I mean, here he's out there at Team USA representing his country, but that's a good trade for both teams. And it just feels like that was never, ever the case with when you're dealing with Morey. And I also feel like part of the damaged goods stuff that is Ben Simmons, that's on the Philadelphia 76ers and their handling of that kid and their inability to understand what was going on with him, whether it's on the court or off the court, and not embracing who he was. And I think some of it is Simmons has never been that guy and they portrayed him as that guy. But I also think that, when they packaged him and shipped him off for James Harden, that was a mess. And it's a mess that the Sacramento Kings are so lucky they didn't get involved in. But it's also not just a player's mess. It's a player and a team and a franchise as a whole that didn't do right by a young kid and help him get through some stuff. And so, yeah, I just feel like there's a lot of things that go on there. And then, like I've told you guys a million times, like James Harden is, my least favorite player to watch in the league, especially in his heyday when all he did was dribble the air out of the ball and then play hot potato at the last second. He's a really, really good player. And, I respect like the history of who he is and what he means and all that, but I still wouldn't want to watch him every night or cover him every night. And I think in this situation, like both of these guys, you reap what you sow. And, they both put themselves in this situation where this could happen. And good. I'm glad. It's a team that now is in a bunch of a mess of trouble, and a player that doesn't want to play, and good. It's one less team Sacramento Kings need to worry about. It's one less team that's out there hunting, because that team is going to have to take a step backwards to take a step forward.
So with this going down the way it went down, and it just looks like it's going to completely blow up. Harden, he's not long for Philadelphia whenever he gets traded, which in turn, like I've been saying for a while, Embiid will be gone soon. There's a part of my mind, and Damian felt the same way. You need to quietly, under the radar, start exploring trade opportunities for Embiid right now. Yes, coming off the MVP season. We all know how this is going to work out. It's not going to work out with him staying in Philadelphia or you guys winning. With all that happening, is it safe to say the process was a failure and that tanking doesn't work?
I mean, it depends on what your, I guess, your definition of success is. Because if your definition of success is finding an MVP and making it into the playoffs every year, then sure, it sort of worked. But
they were making the playoffs before they started tanking. Like, that's the problem. They got back to exactly where they were.
Like literally, like the last thing before tanking was a Game 7 semifinal loss to the Boston Celtics.
Yeah,
in Boston.
Well,
Andre,
that, and I would point out too that a couple of things. Number one, that wasn't Daryl Morey. Like, that was Sam Hinkie, right? So that's the one distinction that even though Sam Hinkie was a Daryl Morey guy in Houston, so like I don't want to fully like say that it's not part of the issue,
but it still wasn't him though. It was a different regime. So
yeah. And then the other thing I would point out is that the NBA draft, I mean, like the NFL draft and Major League Baseball draft, it's a total crapshoot. There's like one or two guaranteed players that you can put your name on every single draft that you think will be great. And even those don't work out. You know, like even here we are, you know, year 3 of Cade Cunningham. We still don't know what he is, you know, and he was like, oh, the next whatever. So I think that that's something that needs to be pointed out, that just because you end up losing and the lottery system doesn't always play into your favor, you know, that's just, it's the facts, you know, like how do you know what pick you're going to be drafting? Like Nerlens Noel, right? He's what, the 6th pick in the 2013 NBA draft. Yeah, it is 2013 NBA draft. He goes a pick ahead of Ben McLemore. Like, they took a flyer on a guy who had a knee injury that probably would have been the 2nd pick or the 1st pick in the draft, and he ended up not working. Joel Embiid was damaged goods. They put a bunch of time into him. He missed so much time early in his career that like we started worrying whether he's going to be the next Greg Oden. And so that was another thing where, you know, they were not only taking, you know, like they weren't just drafting high lottery picks, but they were also drafting guys who had injuries that they knew that they could sit out for a year and basically just try to develop so they could lose more games. So yeah, I don't like tanking. I don't think it's ever worked out for anybody all that well. But then again, you know, every time the San Antonio Spurs lose and are really bad, they get the 1st pick in the draft with a revolutionary player and they win. So maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
I said earlier that the 76ers are low-key the worst run organization in basketball. And I don't think that's a stretch. I don't think that's a hot take. And I'd say people do this all of the time with Sacramento, and it's fine. Sacramento earned that reputation that they're digging themselves out of. But I'll point this out because I don't hear many people say it. Joel Embiid, Jaylen Brown, and Jason Tatum could all be on the same team right now. And I'm not talking about Jesse's beloved Boston Celtics. The 76ers passed on Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum.
Yeah.
And that's not drafting at like 7. Like, they're drafting at 2, 3, and 1. And they missed on these guys.
They got duped out of,
and they don't get killed for it.
They got duped out of additional picks to pass on Tatum. Is that what happened?
Yeah, I think
they gave up
something.
Yeah, they gave up a high 1st round pick to move from 3 to 1, and that was after they had the pick swap with the Kings. So the Kings
to go get
were at 8.
God bless them.
Yeah. The Kings were at 8. They moved up to 3, had to move back to 5 because they had the pick swap with Philadelphia, which again, you can blame Vlade Divac for, but you can also say Vlade banked on the worst run franchise in basketball in the Philadelphia 76ers not being able to use a pick swap. And it just happened to be that a move up in the lottery is what doomed him in that situation. And it still worked out for him. They end up.
Yeah, they could have got the Sixers could have De'Aaron. But instead they moved up to get Markelle Fultz.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Well, I mean,
man.
like we talked about this too, like the other day with how the for some reason the Phoenix Suns get off the hook with all this stuff too. I mean, the Phoenix Suns drafted Josh Johnson the pick before De'Aaron Fox. They drafted Jalen Smith instead of Tyrese Halliburton. They drafted DeAndre Ayton instead of Luka Doncic. Like, these aren't things that we can go back and say didn't have, like, sure, Ayton's a top 5 pick in that draft still, but he's not number 1, number 2, number 3. So the fact that they passed on Luka as well should be like on their gravestone when it's all said and done as well. Yeah, trading Steve Brown brings up trading Mikal Bridges.
Wow.
And Cam Johnson for, like, I get it. It's Kevin Durant, but
something like that. It wasn't the Mikal Bridges pick. It was like Zaire Smith or something like that.
They traded Mikal to Phoenix. I don't see where the pick was. I'm just looking at the draft order. Shea Gilgeous.
Didn't Bridges' mom work for the 76ers?
That's right. I remember that. Yeah.
And they were all excited because he got drafted by the 76ers and then traded. And you're like, oh.
They have botched the draft at every turn.
And they're going to do all of this, and then they're going to, as Mike Tyson would say, fade back to Bolivian. Like it's over.
No, I hate
Bolivian.
Yeah, I hate when that happens. I don't think the process works. I think that's just what this. I don't think tanking works. I think that's all. It's in analytics people's imagination. Like it's not a real thing.
Well,
that shows no success.
Well, here's what I will say about that. The idea behind it, the thought of tanking makes sense. Like I get it. Where you lose me is saying that's a better way than what the Kings just did.
Tanking in the final month and a half of a season because Dame Lillard is hurt. Okay. I get that. But when you're setting out for a multi-year plan, that's where I'm like, and when did Colangelo start overseeing all of this? Because he shouldn't be absolved of this either. I know Sam Hinkie was the general manager, but Elton Brand's still involved here somewhere. That's a problem, by the way. Right. And now you got Daryl Morey, you got the Sam Hinkie thing, but Jerry Colangelo doesn't get a pass for this either. This is a mess. This is an absolute debacle.
Yeah.
I agree. But like I said, I understand the thought of it.
I'll say this.
I get it. It's just people always, and we heard this a lot here in Sacramento. If you want to get better, small market, you have to tank. No, you don't. You don't have to tank. You can make savvy moves. You can build a roster without tanking. There's not one way to get to a winning situation. And I think a lot of people believe tanking is tried and true. That's what you got to do. You got to tank. Like, no, there's so many steps before you get to the fact of, oh, let me tank now that you can do to try and get better.
OKC is who is the one that will continue to test this, because that's what they've done the last couple of years. They've done nothing but play the draft pick game and everything else. If there's a way that they can at some point package 5 or 6 or 8 picks and go get a real player that will help put their team over the top, I'm intrigued by it because I think they have been able to accumulate talent. And I think Sam Presti did it once before when it came to building the Westbrook, Harden, Durant package, coming out of the relocation. And so I kind of want to see how that turns out, but it's kind of the same thing. But it takes less time for them, it feels like, because it was only 3 years ago that they were in the playoffs.
Yeah. All right. I know one thing. I know one thing needs to change though, because some people talking a little bit crazy. James, you might have said this too, so I'm gonna need everybody to chill. This talk about Nikola Jokic should have been the MVP because of the way that the Philadelphia 76ers season ended. There are 3 guys who could have been the MVP. Joel Embiid was a deserving individual. Joel deserved to win the MVP. Now his team sucks and his management is ass, but Joel had a hell of a season. Jokic did too. There's a fine argument for Jokic being the MVP, but Joe was incredible. And again, Giannis. I guess Giannis is in the LeBron James category of being banned of winning MVPs. But like this, this happened to him too. He didn't win the MVP the year he won the title, and everyone's, he should have won the MVP again. It's like, well, no, Jokic deserved it too. Joel deserves the MVP. He had an incredible individual season. It's just his team sucks, and it's going to get worse for Joel.
I don't feel like anything that happened in the playoffs takes away from Embiid's MVP. I just think that like what Jokic has done, it just gets ignored because he's not flashy and
Because
he
he
can be
hates
boring.
basketball.
Yeah, I
He's
you
bored,
know
like
like
he wants to be at home with horses, and it's like, well, man, I don't want to watch you on Christmas. But I guess we both got jobs we got to do, Jokic.
yeah, but again, my argument wasn't that Embiid didn't deserve it. It was that Jokic probably deserved it again, and that they just don't give the third straight MVP,
That's
which
how I
is what.
felt about Giannis, so I understand.
Yeah, it's what happened to Giannis as well. People get bored with what's happening, and they just think, okay, well, I think the problem is that both of them hadn't won a title to match with it to say, like, look, I am the best player in the league. Now you have Jokic back to a point where, again, he should have been at least like a really, really close second. And I think he probably was, right? I don't remember what the voting was, but Jokic's stats, like the advanced stats on him, are just stunning. And they all equate to victories. So I'm not sure why people like floated out there that he's just a paper MVP. Like his team is really good. He's really good, and he's the reason why his team is really good. I don't think there's any argument there.
Oh, I mean, I agree with you, James, but
Still don't want to watch him on Christmas.
definitely going to be traveling that day. The only thing I would say to that is the reason why that was the case before the NBA Finals is because he hadn't won anything. He hadn't equated.
Well, I didn't. I understand
that, and I'm just saying that's where it came.
I didn't
from.
agree. I didn't think that was. I can't change my tune. I didn't think that was fair to Jokic.
I didn't think it was either, especially with the whole circumstance.
The only reason I was okay with it is because that's what y'all did to Giannis.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all did the same exact thing to Giannis when he won 2 in a row and said he didn't win a championship. Went on your podcast said I can't vote for him if he's not winning championships.
Well, the thing with Jokic too.
Okay, I feel like that's what they did to Jokic,
and to no fault of his own, because
they gave it to Joel. He ain't never gonna win one. Just give it to him.
But to no fault of his own, because Jamal Murray was out as well, which is it's a whole nother conversation, to be honest with you. But Jokic wasn't even close. Like Jokic was using him 5 games in the first round.
Well,
he lost the 6 games in another first round series.
Yeah.
And when Jamal was there, he was able to do work, or the team was able to do work. But when it was him and he was just putting up stats, they getting swept by Phoenix. Like, I'm just saying.
I hear you.
I think Porter was out too. Like, I mean, one guy can't win a playoff series against a solid team. I mean, they just can't.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I don't know. I don't think. I mean, it's a regular season MVP, and that's what it should be. Like, you should look at the top 5 or 6 teams in record. You should look at who's great within those teams. You should find who's the best of the best, and that's kind of how you should do it. And if there's a huge disparity over who those top 5 teams, so if like the number 1 team is 12 games better than everyone else in the league, or 8 games better, they should probably have a guy on their team that's the MVP, or at least highly considered. And so, yeah, I don't know.
It shouldn't really matter, but we're all human beings. If it's close, which I think Joel and Jokic was pretty close, part of the thing that probably seeps into people's head is, well, Embiid actually gives a damn about this. Like Jokic don't even care. So
it's not that Jokic doesn't care, because if he didn't care, he wouldn't show up every single night. I think that there's a perception about Jokic.
That doesn't care about like being successful. He don't care about the MVP. Like Joel Embiid has been trying to get this award for like 3 years. And it was maybe this year it was close enough where maybe the writers were like, well, you know what? He cares about this. Jokic did already won 2. The story, the narrative, Joel, he's earned it. He's earned it. Give it to him this year. Could have been something like that.
Yeah, I'm not saying that Joel Embiid didn't deserve the MVP, but I certainly don't think that him wanting it should have any bearing on anything. Like the MVP should go to the most valuable player in the league. And that can be within his team structure. It can be with whatever. Like statistically speaking, Jokic was still a much better player, whether he wants the MVP award or cares about the MVP award or not. He was still the best player in the league. in my opinion. And I think he was overlooked quite a few times because there's just this perception of him that he doesn't really care. And I will say this, people who are out there just pining for awards, like they should be in the gym trying to get to the championship, not worrying about whether they're going to be an MVP or an all-star. Like that's why I've always had the utmost respect for De'Aaron Fox. Like, hey man, I don't care about the all-star game. And if I make it because we're good, not because I was good. And so I get that.
To go full circle, James Harden cried to get an MVP award.
He did.
He cried for like 3 straight years to get it.
And then decided to just pad his stats to get there.
The one thing I will say about that, and I agree with you in theory, James. One thing I will say about that though is the reason why I don't have a huge problem when Joel's like, yo, I need to do what I got to do to win MVP and be successful and get these awards is because when things go wrong, they always blame those guys.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not Joel Embiid's fault or Jokic's fault that the team lost. But just like I just said, I didn't agree with what was happening, but that was what was said. Jokic can't win when he ain't playing with Jamal Murray. They blame those guys. So if they want to go out there and say, yo, I need some of the glory on the back end, I understand it. Now the guys that are special, like Jokic, and you mentioned De'Aaron Fox, they can look past all that and they can understand, like, I'm gonna get the brunt of the criticism if things go wrong. I'll probably get praise if they go right, but none of that matters. It's just about how we play as a team. Those are the special guys. Steph Curry's another guy like that as well.
Yeah, and if the Kings aren't pacing to be like a 2, 3, 4, 5 in this year's at the All-Star break, Fox might not make the All-Star team. And part of it is because he's not that guy who goes out there and says me, me, me. And then he gets to the All-Star game and he barely played and he didn't even try to score. And he didn't score. And so these are things where people shouldn't be concerned if he disrespected the All-Star game or, it's not something that is high on his list of wants because that's not who he is. He wants to win games. He's not worried about the extra stuff.
James, we've got about 90 seconds. Any thoughts on the blind side?
Man, this is going to get complicated. And if you read that, okay, so if you've read any of it or you've really dug deep into that story, there are so many things that he didn't understand as a human that because of his upbringing, because of his lack of schooling, that if you fully took advantage of him like that and you made millions and millions of dollars off of selling his story, but didn't give anything to him at all, shame on you and shame on Sandra Bullock and those people for making the movie.
Wait a minute. Sandra Bullock, we went down this road earlier. This is not Bullock's fault. This is Leanne Tui's fault. Sandra Bullock did nothing wrong.
Get back to
Do your research.
Oh,
do your research.
Sandra Bullock's got to turn over the Academy Award. Damn it.
Do your research.
Damn it. All right.
You don't portray the devil and then not say, I didn't know it was the devil. Because those people are looking more and more like not very good people who did some not very good things.
Oh, boy. Sandra.
Sandra Bullock and Reggie Bush, 1-1.
You have to give it back. You're right. Give it back, Sandra.
I think I'm going to go throw up. I'm going to go throw up real quick, and then we can go do our second live radio show of the day.